dear listeners, and welcome to another episode of our podcast where we help you learn English in a fun and easy way. I'm Linda.
And I'm Leo. Today, we're going to talk about something really important for anyone learning English: how to think in English. This might sound a little tricky, but don't worry, we're going to break it down for you.
Yes, thinking in English is one of the best ways to get better at the language. When you start thinking in English, you don't have to translate everything in your head from your native language. That makes it easier to speak, listen, and even write in English.
Exactly, but first, let's talk about why we often think in our native language. It's natural because that's the language we've been using for a long time, maybe all our lives. So, when we start learning English, our brain wants to go back to what it knows best, our native language.
That's right, but if we keep translating everything in our heads, it can slow us down. It can also make us feel less confident when speaking English. So, the goal is to start thinking directly in English. But how do we do that?
Good question. Linda, let's start with some simple steps. First, try to surround yourself with English as much as possible. Listen to English music, watch English movies or shows, and read simple English books or articles. The more you hear and see English, the more your brain gets used to it.
Yes, and don't worry if you don't understand everything at first. The key is to keep going. Your brain is amazing. It will start to pick up patterns and words over time. And soon, you'll notice that you don't have to translate as much anymore.
Another tip is to start thinking in English about simple, everyday things. For example, when you wake up in the morning, try to describe your day in English in your mind. You can say things like, "I'm going to brush my teeth now," or "I have to go to work today." These are simple sentences, but they help your brain get used to thinking in English.
I love that idea, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Don't worry about making mistakes in your thoughts. The important thing is to practice. Over time, your sentences will get better and more natural.
That's so true, Linda. Another way to start thinking in English is to talk to yourself. I know it might sound a little funny, but it works. When you're alone, try to have a conversation with yourself in English. You can talk about what you're doing, what you're thinking, or even how you're feeling.
Yes, and you can also ask yourself questions like, "What should I have for dinner?" Or "What do I need to do today?" and then answer them in English. It's a great way to practice thinking in English without any pressure.
Speaking of pressure, it's important to remember that thinking in English is a process. It takes time, so be patient with yourself. Don't get discouraged if it feels hard at first. Everyone goes through this stage when learning a new language.
Absolutely, Leo. It's like learning to ride a bike. At first, it feels wobbly and you might fall a few times. But the more you practice, the easier it gets. And before you know it, you're riding smoothly.
That's a perfect example, Linda, and just like riding a bike, thinking in English gets easier with practice. One thing that can really help is learning phrases and expressions that are common in English. For example, instead of thinking it's raining cats and dogs in your native language, try to learn what that phrase means directly in English. This way, you won't have to translate it in your head.
Yes, idioms and expressions are a great way to think in English. They help you understand the language the way native speakers do, and they're also fun to learn. You can start by learning a few common ones and then try to use them in your thoughts.
Another thing to keep in mind is that you don't have to think in full sentences all the time. Sometimes just thinking in single words or short phrases is enough. For example, if you see a beautiful sunset, you might just think beautiful instead of "that's a beautiful sunset." The more you practice, the more natural it will feel.
Steps, like thinking of single words or phrases, it's still progress, and every little bit counts.
And here's another tip. Try to label things around you in English. For example, when you're in your kitchen, think about the names of things in English: fridge, sink, spoon, cup. This helps you connect the English words with the objects directly without going through your native language.
I love that idea. It's like building a small English world around you. And the more you do it, the more you'll find yourself naturally thinking in English.
Exactly, and it's okay to take your time with this. Thinking in English is like building a new habit. It won't happen overnight, but with practice, it will become a natural part of your thinking process.
So true, Leo. And remember, everyone learns at their own pace. So don't compare yourself to others. Just focus on your own progress and keep practicing.
That's a great reminder, Linda, and for our listeners, just remember that the more you practice thinking in English, the easier it will get. Start with simple thoughts, surround yourself with English, and be patient with yourself.
Yes, and we'll talk more about how to improve your thinking in English with some advanced tips. But for now, just keep practicing what we've talked about today.
Okay, and now we're going to dive even deeper. And we'll talk about more advanced tips and practices to help you really start thinking in English every day.
And practicing with easy thoughts. But as you get more comfortable, there are more strategies you can use to take your English thinking to the next level.
Let's start with one of the most powerful tools you have, your imagination. When you're learning a new language, your imagination can be a great friend. Try to imagine conversations or situations in English. For example, think about how you would introduce yourself to someone new or how you would order food at a restaurant. The more you practice these scenarios in your mind, the more prepared you'll be when they happen in real life.
That's a great tip, Leo. And you can also imagine things that are a little more complex. For example, think about a story you like or a movie you've seen and try to retell it in English in your mind. Start with simple sentences, and as you get more confident, try to add more details.
Yes, and if you're not sure about some words or phrases, it's okay. Just try your best, and if you need to, look them up later. The key is to keep practicing and not to worrying too much about making mistakes in your thoughts.
Absolutely. Remember, this is all about building a habit. The more you practice thinking in English, the easier it will become. And over time, you'll notice that you're able to think about more and more complex ideas in English.
Speaking of complex ideas, another great way to practice thinking in English is to challenge yourself with new vocabulary. When you learn a new word, try to use it in your thoughts as soon as possible. For example, if you learn the word motivation, you could think, I need motivation to study English today, or what motivates me to learn English. This helps the new word stick in your mind and become part of your thinking process.
That's a great point, Leo. And to make it even more fun, try to create sentences with your new vocabulary that relate to your life. The more personal the sentence, the easier it will be to remember the word and use it naturally.
And don't forget about the power of repetition. When you're trying to think in English, repeating phrases or sentences in your mind can be very helpful. For example, if you're trying to remember how to say something, repeat it to yourself several times. This helps your brain get used to the new language patterns.
Repetition is really important, and it's also a good idea to review things you've learned before. If you've been practicing thinking in English for a while, go back and review some of the things you practiced earlier. This reinforces your learning and helps you see how much you've improved.
Yes, and reviewing can be very motivating. When you see how much progress you've made, it gives you more confidence to keep going. And speaking of motivation, let's talk about how to stay motivated to keep practicing thinking in English.
Great idea, Leo. Motivation is key to learning any language. One way to stay motivated is to set small, achievable goals for yourself. For example, you could set a goal to think in English for 10 minutes every day. As you get more comfortable, you can increase the time or challenge yourself with more complex thoughts.
That's a really good tip, Linda. Setting small goals helps you stay focused and gives you a sense of accomplishment when you reach them. Another way to stay motivated is to remind yourself why you're learning English. Maybe it's for a job, to travel, or to connect with new people. Whatever your reason, keep it in mind and use it to push yourself to keep practicing.
Yes, and don't forget to celebrate your progress. Learning a new language is a big achievement, so be proud of yourself for every step you take. Even if it's just a small improvement, it's still progress.
That's so true, Linda, and remember, you're not alone on this journey. There are many people out there learning English just like you. You can connect with them, share your experiences, and learn from each other. Sometimes, having a friend or study partner can make the process more fun and less stressful.
Yes, practicing with others can be really helpful. You can even practice thinking in English together. For example, you can discuss a topic in English, and then both try to think about it more deeply in English afterward. It's a great way to reinforce your learning and get different perspectives.
And if you don't have someone to practice with, don't worry. There are lots of online communities where you can connect with other English learners. You can join a forum, participate in a chat group, or even find a language exchange partner.
That's a great suggestion, Leo. And now that we've talked about motivation, let's move on to another important aspect of thinking in English: being patient with yourself.
Yes, patience is so important. Learning to think in English is not something that happens overnight. It's a gradual process, and it's okay if it takes time. The important thing is to keep practicing and not to get discouraged if you don't see results right away.
Exactly. And remember, everyone learns at their own pace. Some people might start thinking in English quickly, while others might take a little longer. That's perfectly normal. The key is to stay consistent and keep practicing.
And if you ever feel stuck, it's okay to take a break. Sometimes stepping away for a little while and then coming back with a fresh mind can make a big difference. Just don't give up.
That's so true, Leo. And when you come back, you might find that things are a little easier than they were before. Learning a language is like planting a seed. It takes time to grow, but with care and attention, it will eventually bloom.
I love that metaphor, Linda, and it's a great reminder that learning English is a journey. There will be ups and downs, but if you keep going, you'll reach your goal.
Yes, and along the way, don't forget to enjoy the process. Learning a new language is an exciting adventure. You're not just learning new words and grammar, you're also opening yourself up to new experiences, new cultures, and new ways of thinking.
That's a beautiful way to put it, Linda. And speaking of new ways of thinking, let's talk about how to keep your English thoughts active throughout the day.
Good idea, Leo. One way to keep your English thoughts active is to make it a habit to check in with yourself in English throughout the day. For example, when you're doing something routine, like washing the dishes or walking to work, take a moment to think about what you're doing in English.
Yes, and you can also use your phone to help with this. Set reminders to think in English at certain times of the day. Or, if you use social media, try to read and interact with English content. The more you engage with English throughout the day, the more natural it will feel to think in English.
And don't forget to reflect on your day in English before you go to bed. You can think about what you did, what you learned, and what you want to do tomorrow. This helps you end the day with English thoughts, which can carry over into your dreams and the next day.
That's a great tip, Linda. Reflecting in English can really help reinforce what you've learned. And it's a good way to wind down at the end of the day.
Yes, and speaking of winding down, we've covered a lot of ground in these 2 episodes. We hope you found our tips and advice helpful in your journey to think in English.
Remember, thinking in English is a powerful tool that can help you become more fluent and confident in the language. It takes time and practice, but with patience and persistence, you can do it.
Absolutely. Keep practicing, stay motivated, and most importantly, enjoy the process. You're doing something amazing by learning a new language, and every step you take brings you closer to your goal.
Thanks for joining us on How to Think in English. We're so proud of you for taking this step, and we're here to support you every step of the way.
Yes, thank you so much for listening. Keep practicing, and remember you've got this.
Until next time, take care and keep thinking in English.
Bye for now.
Goodbye.